Hi everyone, and welcome to the weekly predictions based on astrology for the week of June 22nd, 2020. First, let's do a quick recap of the predictions for the previous week. In terms of the market directions, my predictions actually were not that great for this last week. I thought that Monday and Tuesday would be down days, and actually the market went up. Then on Wednesday, I thought that the market would go up, and it went down. And on Thursday, my prediction was down. Market ended up being mixed, as in Nasdaq was up, Dow Jones was down. Friday, I thought the market would go up, and again, the results were mixed. Nasdaq went down, and Dow Jones did inch up like 0.03%. In terms of other predictions, I do have this long-running prediction that's good for, I guess, the end of this year, and it was also in place for previous year about basically increased probability of various geopolitical shifts, leaders who were in power for a long time passing away, increased sort of number of major earthquakes, increased seismic activity, as well as news about either important events such as maybe accidents or disasters involving buildings collapsing or some sort of large structures collapsing, be it the actual buildings or perhaps changes in leadership, reorganizations, at the top of various governments, corporations, etc. And so for this last week, we did have intensification news about intensification of the China and India tensions, and there's some deadly border clashes in the Himalayas, and also there was footage in the news, in the media, I guess, about the Inter-Korean Liaison Office near the border town in North Korea being destructed, blown up basically, because of the deteriorating or amid deteriorating relations on the peninsula, and that was on June 17th. So again, we have these geopolitical tensions. On the same time, we actually have a older building collapsing. We also had quite a few news about various seismic kind of events, variety of earthquakes from 5 point something to I guess 7.4 near New Zealand. So we have earthquakes in Turkey, Tajikistan, US, of course, and Oklahoma, then also in Iceland, India, and in Indonesia. And in Indonesia, there was basically Indonesia's most active volcano spewed ashes 6 kilometers into the sky. And then we also had some news from Iceland that there, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Grimsvotn volcano was showing signs of increased activity, with the prediction basically being that, not my prediction, but rather seismologist prediction being that it may erupt in the next several weeks to several months. Let's see. And in terms of leaders, I didn't see any kind of news about leaders, heads of corporations or governments. And again, I'm just maybe not necessarily catching all the news, but there was additional prediction that I made for last week, specifically for the period of June 8th through 15th, that there might be increased news about accidents or attacks involving fires, explosions, and athletes. And so kind of combining those two together, indeed, we did have tragic news from last week about a French climber, a teenage female, and she unfortunately fell to her death in the Alps. And again, this was not a famous politician, somebody in power, but it was, again, both fitting the prediction of, unfortunately, an accident happening to an athlete, but also the nature of the accident, again, matches this sort of a ongoing background influence of Pluto conjunct Saturn in Capricorn, which indicates both, of course, Pluto is death, Saturn is also a death or end of cycle, end of life, and Capricorn being in the mountains. So for, like I said, the 2019 and 2020, we can expect a lot of sort of similar news where unfortunately news about death or like some buildings collapsing, structures collapsing, etc. Then I also specifically made a prediction, and that one I made back in January of this year, but basically that this time period of about June 8th through 15th will see a lot of emphasis on a variety of like Neptunian topics, with some concerns about those topics, or some fighting, or some accidents involving, or some basically upsets involving those areas. So one area that Neptune sort of rules or is often connected to is oil, and so I predicted increased news about oil during this time period. And on June 15th, indeed, there was a announcement that U.S. Supreme Court greenlighted pipeline cutting through Appalachian Trail, which of course are concerns about environmental impact of that, but the ruling was that the construction can continue, and that's a $7.5 billion gas pipeline. And of course, as I predicted, both in terms of the predictions that I made for COVID-19 having probably 3 waves, and the news will continue into like about December of this year. And again, for this period of June 8th or 15th, I predicted that there will be increased news about various infectious diseases, be it COVID-19 or some other, typhoid, I don't know, not typhoid, but something that like cholera, or something that has to do with either infection or dirty water, or some sort of kind of filthy conditions. Basically, it's spread of some infection or disease. And we did have this, indeed, during this time period, increased news about this basically spike of the second, I guess, wave, or another wave of cases related to COVID-19. So in the US, there were reports rather about spikes in cases, like in Florida on the June 19th, they reported nearly 4,000 cases in a single day, like a record increase in a single day. In China, there was also news that basically they backtracked on easing the lockdown restrictions. They shut down part of Beijing, I guess, after a fresh cluster of cases, canceled 60% of flights due to the fresh concerns of the coronavirus outbreak. And basically, so indeed, this may be ongoing. And as I said, I think it will actually may even pick up August through November, and may not, kind of phase out finally until like December of 2020. Other sort of Neptunian manifestations that I was expecting: increased news about also chemicals, poisons, pollution, like pollution of water, or pollution with chemicals, etc. And we did have this piece of news on the 16th of June that several New York police officers were rushed to the hospital after supposedly their shakes were contaminated with bleach at a local restaurant, and I think they have recovered by now. So regardless of what actually happened there, the nature of the news does again exactly fit sort of these expected type of events. So we have liquid contaminated with some chemical, and that again fits with the transits that we had at that time, which is Mars conjunct Neptune in Pisces. So we have a lot of water chemicals, but also Mars brings this agitation and basically fire, but really it's also irritation and things that just cause harm or can be damaging, because again, Mars of course is the god of war. Let's see, I also of course made predictions. Again, Neptune has to do with water, and I made predictions that again during this time period, June 8th through 15th especially, we will see increased news about like the excessively wet weather, and we had tons of news about various floods. Without getting into details, basically floods all over Europe, Bulgaria, Hungary, also of course in like Nigeria, then in China. Apparently there are 8.5 million people affected there by various summer floods. And also in US, the Mississippi River basically has been above the flood stage as of the 16th of June for 450 days, which is the second highest, second highest, I guess, number ever. And let's see. Also, specifically for the previous week, I made this prediction for June 17th through 19th that there may be some sort of a reversal in the announcement or retraction, like a retraction of a report. And I did think it would be more related to like farming or groceries, or perhaps travel, like a permission to travel is granted and not revoked. What I did see on the 19th, I guess on the 18th, 19th, on the 18th, AMC theaters have made a announcement that guests would be required to wear masks only in those areas of the country where the masks were mandatory. And then I guess under the public pressure, the following day, on the 19th, they have reversed that I guess a rule that they make for their customers, and they would require customers wear masks. Let's see. Yeah, I also made a prediction again that was specific for last week, for June 19th through 21st, that there may be increased sort of news about prominent leaders or famous persons, and related to businesses that have to do with like communication, transportation, IT, maybe retail sales, etc. And also that there may be increased news about or events related to like young people or education. And on the 15th of June, so a little bit before that, there was actually news that I saw on marketwatch.com that shares of Genius Brand International surged on Monday, the 15th, after this kids media company announced that Arnold Schwarzenegger had agreed to become a significant investor. So this definitely again matches sort of this essence of the transits at that time, although it did occur before the transits were exact. And also we have this sort of ongoing transit, which will be felt strongly through July 10th and especially at the end of June, and then it will come back and be felt again strongly around November 4th through the 20th, especially November 11th and 13th, and that is a conjunction of Pluto and Jupiter, and that is also in Capricorn. And so this is definitely a powerful aspect, and my specific predictions for it were for last week, and also of course they apply, like I said, this week through about July 10th, and then we'll come back in November. And this has to do with sort of expectation of increased news, either about nuclear power or radiation, recycling plants, shifts in governmental sort of leadership or power, basically who's in power, because we have, power, but also perhaps changes in some laws that regarding either international relations or immigration, or increased news about like secretive activities, spying, hacking, burials, mining, waste storage, so anything that happens underground, be it literally or figuratively. And either we can have an expansion of that, or there may be some sort of new laws and rules regulating that. And also perhaps increased news about either terrorist activities or also affecting maybe religious activities, either some sort of laws about like what is the right way of, worshiping something, or who is recognized officially, or which religion is official, something like that. Something that basically some increased news, maybe even fighting over which religion is the best religion or something like that. But basically this is an aspect that can make things sort of blow up where things were underground, and now they just are expanding to the point that they just cannot be sort of hidden anymore, be it radiation or maybe there's waste that's been buried and now it's leaking and it just will have to come out and be dug out, or something that perhaps, again, that would be if Jupiter kind of makes things that are Plutonian, such as the hidden, buried, secretive things expand, or vice versa. You can have Pluto that is usually basically makes things die, then of course be reborn, but first kind of completely destroys them And those things may be related to Jupiter, which will be, of course, immigration, long-distance transportation, any sort of religious figures, professors, colleges, like high-level education, like I think I already mentioned diplomatic sort of relations, judges, and things like that. And actually, to think about it, on the 22nd, today I did see news about Trump either considering or already having signed into some sort of a law or regulation about H1B visas, where there will be basically limits put on that, or they're stopped at least, to allow basically more Americans to get jobs. And so indeed, that's a global aspect that we have, and it will probably affect other countries as well. And again, depending on which planet may have sort of an upper hand, be it Pluto, things that are related to Jupiter, like I said, higher education, immigration, etc., may be completely revamped, something may be completely stopped, destroyed, and then restarted over in some sort of completely new reform capacity, or vice versa, things that are Plutonian, such as, anything that's hidden, secretive, spying, hacking, terrorism, anything that's underground, literally buried, may be expanded or regulated with some law. But again, that's because it's expanding to the point where it just needs to be regulated, or it will be expanding to the point where it becomes seen, where it wasn't seen previously or wasn't dealt with previously. And now it's just reaching gargantuan sort of levels where it just has to be dealt with and regulated somehow, or extracted from underground, or extracted from that secret place that it is hidden at. So, long story short, what kind of manifestations did we have last week that I would say qualify? We did have this news on the 17th of June that out of Germany, the Berlin politicians apparently knowingly were sending kids to leave with pedophiles for decades, and some sort of report came up about that. And of course, abuse, anything that's like mistreating, and of course anything to do with this unsavory kind of behaviors, it is indeed domain of Pluto, because again, it uncovers things that are like basically hidden and secretive, but are done again for some sort of for bad reasons, so to speak, which again, terrorism, spying, hacking also fall into that. And again, probably things were expanding, as I said, that became public knowledge. Finally, it couldn't be hidden anymore. Similarly, sort of on a more cheerful note, we did have news on the 22nd of June out of England that research had discovered the largest prehistoric structure ever found in Britain, and it was apparently hidden near Stonehenge. And I didn't even have a chance to really read about it so much, but I'm excited to read about that. That seems quite interesting, and that is again something that was large and hidden, and now this is the time where it might come up. And as I said, that this influence will be with us till about July 10th, and it will come back in November. So there will be more similar events, perhaps some more discoveries, some more things will become uncovered, and maybe more exciting research will come out of this as well. And also we had this news on the 18th of June out of Australia that there was some sort of a sophisticated cyber attack on all levels of Australian government. And of course, remembering that this Pluto-Jupiter conjunction is happening in Capricorn, which has to do with soil, not soil, but earth and mountains, and also things that, reach peak, but also governments and large corporations, tops, of the structures, leaders. So that again would be definitely a representation of where these issues may occur, that things may have to do with, like, if something is buried, that it's more likely to be buried under soil or in the mountains rather than, say, underwater or somewhere in the air. And finally, of course, in the US, there are a variety of protests, and particularly they're against, I guess, police brutality. And of course, Pluto also rules police or any sort of law enforcement as well. And there are basically demands for police reform. And last Tuesday, Trump signed an executive order specifically to, I guess, limit the use of chokeholds and a variety of other guidelines to basically ensure that the police use their force properly. And that's what I was saying, that when Pluto sort of gets also out of control, or is too much of it, expands to the point where you can't hide the sort of dirty secrets, or in case of this Stonehenge or structure near Stonehenge, it's nothing necessarily dirty, like it's nothing bad about it. Maybe it's dirty because it's literally buried in the soil for hundreds of years, if not thousands. But now it's expanding to the point that it can be contained and it needs to be regulated through some sort of legal means, which is where Jupiter comes in. So that's it for the recap, and now let's get to this week's exciting predictions. So as I already mentioned in the preview, or rather review of previous week, this ongoing background influence, which may bring increased seismic activity or geopolitical shifts, etc., will still be with us till the end of this year. This week it peaks on June 25-26, so right at the end of the week. Then we will also have something to look, I guess, or anticipate come August, is perhaps increased governmental regulations or some sort of controls, embargoes, taxes, tariffs, etc., and or announcements of large structures being built, like large buildings, maybe a dam or a bridge, or a wall or something like that, or major announcements of changes in leadership at the top, be it in the government level or large corporations. So some sort of shakeups may be happening in August, be it again clashes between countries, between international partners, or shakeups where again there's a reshuffling at the top of some major corporations, and those may also, of course, more protests, anti-governmental protests, violence, etc. So the corporations that may be affected will probably be related most likely to communication, transportation, travel, social media, newspapers, car manufacturers, car rental businesses, etc. And those may not only suffer some basically problems, there also could be some problems with the loans or debt or bankruptcies, and or there will be some additional scrutiny of them or regulations by governments, again, perhaps to prevent bankruptcy or as a response to bankruptcy. And there may also be, at that same time, some concerns about corruption, and some whistleblowers may come up, and some sort of scandals involving officials, either from the governments or from the tops of these corporations, may also basically resurface at that time. And in the US, I guess I'd say critical days in August to look forward to are rather 13th through 21st. And then also in China, this time period in August is also going to be significant, with the focus being more related to like healthcare, pharmaceuticals, navy, chemicals, oil pollution, recycling, etc. And that would be especially felt August 9th through 17th. But even though right now it's the end of June, we're kind of building up to that. These things obviously don't occur just out of the blue. So now is that sort of build-up time to that. Let's see, I already mentioned this Pluto-Jupiter conjunction. We will experience perhaps similar manifestations as we just discussed this last week. And another influence that will be with us through about July 7th, and then we'll pick up again mid-November to mid-December, and that's with the US. There will be increased focus on international relations, negotiations, diplomatic, relationships, discussions of like retail sales or communication, transportation in general. And again, there may be some increased announcements about either the end of cycle or restructuring, or some sort of maybe bankruptcy, or business completely kind of changing their strategy. Some cycle has to end before the next one can begin, and either it will be because of some debt or excessive sort of financial burden, or it could be because again there may be some secretive manipulation or financial manipulation, something that is not quite right, and we may hear again whistleblowers coming up talking about it, or it could be perhaps even a mining company or company, it's a recycling company or company that deals with like underground storage that may also experience problems. And again, this may necessitate some cycle ending, perhaps again how they're doing business. If say waste is leaking, they will need to have to come up with a totally new approach, and they will not be able to continue as they have been in the past. There may also be increased news, and that's for the US. again, about hacking, spying, and kind of some sort of damage done through those kind of secretive means to some of these companies. And as I said, communication, transportation, media, retail sales, but also but also there may be increase, perhaps because of this hacking, because of these secretive activities, manipulations, or kind of not paying taxes maybe, or avoiding taxes, etc. There may be increased scrutiny from various governmental commissions, and some increased controls may be imposed on either financial flows, again, to just control, to see where the money is actually going, or because perhaps companies insolvent and they can't pay their bills again. There may be some increased governmental regulation just to kind of try to, I guess, prevent bad outcomes, or it may be that the company is experiencing reduced cash flow because of some governmental regulations that are done, perhaps limiting transportation, etc., and so or changing taxes. And so these companies, again, mostly transportation, communication, maybe retail sales, or companies that have to do with like underground locations, these companies may be experiencing some financial issues or increased controls on them. Let's see, then for China and coronavirus outbreak, again specific to China, I do see in China's chart that basically the second wave increase for China most likely will come actually in July 6th through 24th, especially July 11 and 12 may be significant, and then in October 26th through November 20th, and especially November 9th and 13th are significant. And that's again specifically for China. So there definitely may be increased either waves of coronavirus and or increased events that have to do with, again, healthcare, or hospitals, places that are secluded and or where various like medical, healthcare, pharmaceutical type research is taking place. And this may also be accompanied by some sort of a reform each time that maybe things get worse, but then there's a reform or some sort of new approaches applied to fix things. And let's see, and finally for oil prices, I don't have any predictions for this week specifically, but next period to look forward to, I guess, for oil would be end of July, so especially July 26th or 28th. There may be again increased news about like oil, gas prices. Perhaps there'll be concerns about sales, as well as communication and transportation. So again, maybe there's some problems with transportation, so not enough oil is being used for transportation. And most likely it will coincide with some market drops, especially on July 27th. And then later on, the significant dates for oil sort of related news would be November of this year into February of 2021, and especially the end of January. And at that time, there may be increased news either about like an accident, possibly resulting in the water pollution, or some other significant developments related to like oil, gas, chemicals, etc. And at the same time, this January, at the end of January, 2021, there may also be some surprising developments related to like financial sort of sphere, either like currencies, finance, banks, even cryptocurrencies, and or also airline companies, telecommunication companies, IT companies. So either some sudden bankruptcies may occur at the same time. So I would imagine something like airline is declaring bankruptcies because there's not enough travel. And of course, this also affects oil prices at the same time. So definitely some spike in either service outages, concerns about gas prices, oil prices, and market volatility probably will accompany that. And especially, I would say, look for it on January 18th through 19th of 2021. And then even later after that, in April of 2021, especially April 8th through 11th, there may be yet increased tensions and fighting over oil or among countries that are like major oil producers. And these two may be accompanied by a large market drop on April 8th and or 9th of 2021. So going back to this week, I think that the market or rather I already predicted this in the blog post that I posted on my blog at Tolstunka.com on Sunday. I predicted for Monday that the market would go up, and it did. For Tuesday and Wednesday, I think market will also go up, and then Thursday and Friday, I think it will go down. And by market, I mean NASDAQ and Dow Jones primarily. So for US, June 22nd through 24th are important dates in that we will see most likely increased focus on leaders and what leaders say, how they communicate, and or where they travel, or some agreements that they may be negotiating. These may involve companies like in the retail sales, communication, transportation, or projects in those areas. Something may be clarified like who can travel, where and how, and it will be, again, for US related more to like domestic. Focus will be on sort of on the US rather than internationally. And or there may be some sort of outcome, if there are negotiations, that outcome may be now signed into a law, like especially regarding travel and immigration. And as I said, I wrote this on Sunday, and I did actually see today some headline about Trump making this announcement, or I'm not sure if he already signed it into law, about the basically pause on the HBO visas, and that would definitely fit this kind of a prediction. And so for China, June 22nd through 24th, also important dates. And for China, we may expect some minor concerns or confusion or misinformation or stressful events related to healthcare, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, hospitals, deaths, secret underground locations, or businesses that involve also these underground locations, maybe waste storage or something underground, but also money lending, mining, movies, beverages, navy, and shipment of oil or of any goods really over water. So for those businesses, for those areas, there may be some news about either ongoing negotiation, and if so, or sale, perhaps acquisition, and if so, this kind of negotiation may actually encounter delays, perhaps because there is some confusion, missing info, or even deliberate misinformation or deception. And or there also may be increased news about some unfavorable changes in the taxes or tariffs that may affect these sort of businesses that I just mentioned. Then for the US, 23rd through 24th of June, I may see increased focus on earnings and prices, especially of various domestically produced goods, including produce, groceries, any sort of farm-produced products, as well as real estate. And the news most likely will be positive, such as government offers more support for such businesses, or some sort of international agreement is reached that is profitable for domestic producers in those areas, such as, say, farmers. Then globally, June 25th, which is Thursday, may see news that will be related to like earnings, profits, and there may be some announcements of like either reversal, like maybe a value was projected to be this, and it actually then this projection is being revised, or perhaps a value of some business, was projected to be this, or value of some stock, and that actually, again, those projections are revised, or the value changes based on whatever the news come up at that time. And those businesses or companies may most likely will be related to, again, retail sales, communication and transportation. And something could be like maybe a value of airline tickets dramatically changes, or there's a change in plans to launch some sort of a media platform or service. Again, it's most likely related to transportation, communication, media, news, etc. And or there may be a change in the rules related to travel, like a previously suspended travel service resumes, or previously granted permission to travel is revoked. And also there could be some changes in the future, sort of earnings estimates, or change in the product release date. So again, if some sort of platform or car or phone were to be released, certain date, their release date may change, and that's for June 25th. Then June 25th and 26th, global prediction is that there may be some important public announcement that, or development or event that may affect large groups of people, that may relate to like floods, inclement weather, fires, poisoning, or some other misfortune. So like a disaster or some weather-related event. and that may negatively affect food industry or farmers. Crops perhaps are damaged, or restaurants, grocery stores, anything to do with like basically either feeding or protecting the land. Again, it could be just a weather event, or it could be some other kind of disaster, again, that perhaps some poisoning and, you know, the restaurants have to close, like a chain of restaurants or something like that, or grocery stores. It may even be related to some sort of a homeland security situation, some sort of safety concerns, war on drugs, navy, or some hidden secretive military forces. So again, either something needs to be called in to secure, you know, maybe like some sort of problems related to maybe, again, grocery store or restaurant chain, or somewhere on some farm or something. And some forces need to be called to basically restore safety. Or again, there could be some sort of perhaps news about some poisoning or some problems with food, again, be it because of the weather or because there is, you know, poisoned food. And so again, it may affect places that sell that food. So public perception of whatever that event will be, or developments, may be divided, where half will be in support of it, as in, like, say they will be supporting the restaurant chain, for example, and half will be strongly sort of opposing it and will hate whatever the situation is. So it will be a very, like, affecting large events that might affect large numbers of people, and also will be kind of a will elicit these divisive kind of feelings in the population. And let's see, and so glance ahead. That's just a section of my blog. I'm not going to read all of that, but I guess the next time periods that I see as being significant would be sometime from, let's say, July 20th through 31st, so the end of last, I guess, decade, last third of July. And so that time may be tense, perhaps stressful news, especially for the leaders, maybe a large move with some market drops, like July 20th and 21st could see a drop, 27th can see a major market drop, and also increased focus on oil, gas prices, as well as like food production. Now, the good news is that, I guess, for the US, July 27th through 30th may actually see positive news, such as improved earnings or additional funding or increased value or some permissions granted or some other beneficial developments related to areas like sports, racing, engines, military, as well as stock market, entertainment industries, and casinos. So I guess there are some positive news to look forward to later in next month. So this particular week doesn't look too bad, and I hope you're enjoying your great weather and health, etc., and staying safe out there, and you enjoyed this video, and we'll come back and watch another one next week. Until then, catch you guys later. Bye.